Whenever you send goods from the United States to another country, you must abide by U.S. export regulations or face fines, restrictions on future exports, or even jail time. To protect yourself from these penalties, you need to understand the basics of export regulations, including when you can't export an item or can't export it without first obtaining an export license. In this video, I'll explain the basics of export compliance and outline the procedures you need to follow to determine if there are any restrictions on your exports. But first, make sure you subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any of our videos sharing practical advice for exporters and importers. Any item that is sent from the United States to a foreign destination is an export. Items include commodities, software or technology, and things like clothing, building materials, circuit boards, automotive parts, blueprints, design plans, retail software packages, and technical information. It doesn't matter how you ship your goods out of the country. You can send your item through the mail, hand carry it on an airplane, attach it to an email, make it available to download from a website, or even provide information over the phone. These are all considered exports. Not only that, if you provide technology or source code to a foreign national in the United States, that is deemed to be an export, and the same export restrictions apply. The Bureau of Industry and Security, or BIS, is responsible for implementing and enforcing the U.S. Export Administration Regulations, or EAR, which regulates the export of most commercial and some military items. There are other agencies, like the Directorate of Defense Trade Control, that control more specialized items, and it's important that you first determine which agency has jurisdiction over your goods. We've included a link to an article below that explains how to determine jurisdiction, but because most items fall under the jurisdiction of BIS, I'm going to focus on that for this video. A relatively small percentage of U.S. exports that fall under the jurisdiction of BIS require a license or have other restrictions. It depends on your item's technical characteristics, the destination, the end user, and the end use of the item. You should ask yourself these 4 questions before every export. What are you exporting? Where are you exporting? Who will receive your item? What will your item be used for? A key step in determining if you need an export license is knowing whether your goods have an Export Control Classification Number. Abbreviated ECCN, it is an alphanumeric 5-character code that includes an item category, a product category, and a primary reason for control. All ECCN codes are listed on the Commerce Control List, which is part of the Export Administration Regulations. An ECCN always starts with a number, one of the Commerce Control List's 10 broad categories, and then is followed by a letter, which represents one of 5 product groups. Once you've found the correct category and product group, you can look through the listings in that group to determine if your item has an ECCN. For example, if you want to export polygraph equipment designed for use by law enforcement agencies, you would look in Category 3 for electronics and then Product Group A for equipment. When you do, you'll come across the entry 3A981. Read through the information at the top of the listing to determine if it describes your item, which in this example it does. I'll explain what the rest of the information under this listing means in just a couple of minutes. You can scroll through the Commerce Control List online to classify your products, or you can use software like Shipping Solutions Product Classification Software that allows you to enter a short description of your product, and the software will take you right to potential ECCN matches. With the Shipping Solutions software, you simply type polygraph into the product classification software, and it displays the results with Category 3 highlighted. If you click on the plus sign next to this category, you can drill down by continuing to click on the bolded results until you reach the correct ECCN of 3A981. If you click on the notebook icon, it provides additional documentation from the regulations. If your item falls under the BIS jurisdiction and is not listed on the CCL, which means it doesn't have an ECCN, the regulations designate it as EAR 99. EAR 99 items generally consist of less sensitive consumer goods and do not require a license in most situations. However, if you plan to export an EAR 99 item to an embargoed country or to an end user of concern, or in support of a prohibited end use, you may still need to apply for an export license. The second factor for determining whether you need an export license is based on where your item is going. Part 746 of the EAR lists embargoed destinations, sanctions on certain items to specific destinations, sanctions on specific Russian industries, and additional controls imposed by the Office of Foreign Asset Control, which is part of the U.S. Treasury Department. For some destinations, it doesn't matter what the ECCN classification is. With some exceptions related to humanitarian aid, you can't export to Cuba, Iran, North Korea, or Syria without an export license, which you probably won't be able to get. Restrictions to other countries are based on the classification of your goods. If we look back at the ECCN entry for our polygraph equipment, 3A981, we see a paragraph labeled License Requirements. That paragraph lists the reason this item is controlled under the EAR as CC, which stands for Crime Control. It also identifies CC Column 1 on the country chart, which I'll explain in a minute. There are 8 reasons why items may be controlled under the Export Administration regulations: chemical and biological weapons, nuclear non-proliferation, national security, missile technology, regional stability, firearms convention, crime control, and anti-terrorism. While polygraph equipment is only controlled for crime control reasons, other items can be controlled for multiple reasons. If your item is controlled for one or more of these reasons, you now need to refer to the Commerce Country Chart found in the EAR. Each of the reasons for control has at least one column on a grid with a list of all the countries of the world listed in alphabetical order down the left side of the page. If there is an X in the box based on the reason for control of your item and the country of destination, an export license is required unless a license exception is available. In our example, 3A981 is controlled for crime control reasons, and the CCL entry refers to CC Column 1. That means we scroll down the column labeled CC1 until we find the row for our country of destination. If we scroll down to Germany, the box at the intersection of CC1 and Germany is empty, which means this item does not require an export license unless you are exporting to an end user or end use of concern. However, if we keep scrolling down the column until we reach Honduras, we see an X in the box, and that means a license is required to ship polygraph equipment to Honduras. Just like the shipping solution software can help you more quickly find the correct ECCN classification for your product, it makes it easier to determine if a license is required based on its classification. I simply enter the country of export, country of manufacture, and country of import, which I can set as defaults, and then enter the ECCN number. When I click Next, I quickly get the results. Again, if my item is going to Germany, there is no ECCN reason for control. But if I enter Honduras as the country of import, I get a red light that indicates a license is required. If I do need an export license, Shipping Solutions Export Controls software will also tell me if a license exception is available, which it is not for my polygraph equipment. Since February 2022, BIS has expanded the list of items controlled for export to Russia to include what it is calling Common High Priority List items, which are identified by their 6-digit Harmonized System or HS codes. The export control software has the added benefit that it will also use that information to determine if you need an export license if you enter your product's export HS code into the search screen. Several different U.S. agencies publish lists of entities that you can't export to without a license, even if your item doesn't normally require a license based on the ECCN and Commerce Country Chart or based on an EAR 99 designation. These are companies, organizations, or individuals who appear on one of more than 200 different denied party or restricted party lists. The most significant of these lists are published by the Departments of State, Treasury, and Commerce and include the Denied Persons List, who are individuals and entities that have been denied export privileges, including people who are located in the United States. The Unverified List, which is a list of parties that the BIS was unable to verify in previous transactions and are considered to be a red flag. Entity List, whose participation in a transaction can trigger a license requirement under the EAR. Specially Designated Nationals and Blocked Persons List, which includes targeted foreign countries, terrorism sponsoring organizations, and international narcotics traffickers. The International Trade Administration publishes a free consolidated screening list on its website that screens more than a dozen lists, including the 4 I just mentioned. The page includes a search engine where you can enter the names and addresses of the parties that are part of your export transaction. In addition, the page makes the list files available to download, so you can use them with your own interface and an API, so you can link your internal system to the search engine. Alternately, Shipping Solutions Restricted Party Screening software allows you to enter the organization, address, and contact name for potential customers and quickly screen against hundreds of lists published by U.S. agencies, as well as about 100 additional lists published by international agencies and other countries. Results are saved in a database to serve as an audit trail in case your company ever gets audited by the Office of Export Enforcement, the FBI, or some other agency that has jurisdiction over exporting. I simply enter the information I have about a potential business partner, and in this case, I get a 100% match with at least one of the restricted party lists. In addition, I also get a 100% match with the address for a company on the list. You can click on the entity ID to get more details about the matching entity. If you determine that someone in your export transaction appears on one or more of these denied party lists, you should read through the list requirements to see what kind of restrictions are in place. In some cases, you may even need to report the match to the appropriate agency, even if you don't proceed with the transaction. Some end uses are prohibited, while others may require an export license. For example, the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction and the missiles to deliver them without specific authorization from BIS. If you have questions about what types of end uses require a license, you should review Part 744 of the Export Administration Regulations and contact BIS if you have any questions. After you answer these 4 questions, you should have a good idea whether you need to apply for an export license or whether you are free to export. If you still have doubts, reach out to BIS for assistance. As I mentioned before, the penalties for non-compliance can be significant. Administrative penalties are now at $364,000 per violation, or twice the value of the export transaction, whichever is greater. Criminal penalties can reach $1 million per violation and up to 20 years in prison. Most exports from the United States do not require a license and may be exported under the designation NLR. In that case, you would include NLR on your export documents and when filing your electronic export information through the automated export system. If your product has an ECCN classification and the Commerce Country Chart indicates a license is required for your destination country, check to see if a license exception is available. Shipping Solutions Export Control Software will tell you if you can use a license exception. Part 740 of the Export Administration Regulations explains each of the license exceptions, as does the video and the blog post we have linked to below. If it turns out your item requires a license to be exported, you must apply for one on the BIS website by going to the Simplified Network Application Process, which they abbreviate as SNAP-R, webpage. If your application is approved, you will receive a license number and expiration date to use on your export documents. A BIS-issued license is usually valid for 4 years, and you should be sure to make note of and abide by any conditions associated with your license. In summary, here's what you need to do. 1. Ensure that your export falls under the Commerce Department's jurisdiction. 2. Classify your item by reviewing the Commerce Control List. 3. If your item has an ECCN, identify the reasons for control. 4. Cross-reference the ECCN controls against the Commerce Country Chart to see if a license is required. If yes, determine if a license exception is available. 5. Ensure that no prohibited end users or end uses are involved with your export transaction. 6. Include the correct license information, EAR 99 or the export license number, on your paperwork and in your AES filing. Thousands of successful exporters use shipping solution software to make their export documentation and compliant processes easier. Click on the link below to get a free trial subscription to our international trade compliance software. There's absolutely no obligation. If you like this video, like it, share it, and make sure you're subscribed to our channel. Watch for more videos sharing real practical advice for exporters and importers.